Thanks for tuning in to PVN. And today we have Lee Camp joining us again. How are you doing today, Lee?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
That's good to hear. And just in case some of the audience isn't familiar, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a landscaper. I do mostly like leaf blowing work. Not sure what you guys wanted to talk about, but
So
no,
fall is your season.
I hosted Redacted, hosted and head wrote Redacted Tonight for 8 years, 375 episodes, and been doing comedy and political comedy for 20 some odd years. And just the other day, about a month ago, RT America shut down, show canceled, all the back videos banned on YouTube globally, and my podcast, Moment of Clarity, deleted from Spotify. That all happened in the span of about 3 days. So I think I'm now one of the most censored comedians in America.
All right. Well, we're going to ask you some questions today, and I guess we'll get started with Andrew.
All right. So how you doing, Lee? Thanks
All
for
right,
coming on. I guess my question will start out with, going off of the fact that you are one of the most censored, if not the most censored comedians right now. I know that kind of from RT to Rockfin, you were able to quickly, move over to Rockfin and get some content there, right? And I think that's always sort of a challenge where it's when people get censored, right? What do you say to certain maybe smaller platforms that have maybe also gotten censored and that haven't been able to necessarily go into Rockfin? Because I think there is a process. Like, where do you say as to how should kind of smaller companies, or not companies, independent media conglomerates that struggle to get their word out, where should they go? What would you recommend to them, and kind of say to them if like Rockfin is not necessarily something that they're able to get going immediately?
Yeah, and actually, the main platform I've been working with recently is Patreon. Unfortunately, I know I need to move away from there because I know they've been deleting people recently as well. But anyway, I've been an advocate for a while now. Of creating the new platforms that are decentralized, that are against censorship, that do facilitate organizing and activism, and are not just can't just be ripped out from under us as all the big tech platforms have done. I mean, besides all this recent censorship, I've been essentially shadow banned on Facebook since 2016. Shadow banned on YouTube for the past several years. Heavily suppressed. So these big tech platforms, the day might come today, it might come 5 years from now. But if you are truly speaking out and truly speaking the truth and speaking it in a way that is not allowable, not acceptable on your mainstream airwaves, then you will eventually be either algorithmically suppressed or straight up, deleted and banned. And so we have to build up the alternatives. Some of them are starting to gain some traction, like Rockfin, like Rumble, like Panquake just had its first reveal the other day. And so, or maybe it's today. So I think we have to build up those alternatives. I'm not one of the people that says, oh, just delete Facebook and everything, because then you end up in a situation where all the activists, all the anti-war voices have deleted all the platforms that actually have a lot of people on them. So I don't think we should just, say, screw it all and stand out on a street corner and yell instead of using any social media. I think we have to use the tools that are there while building up the alternatives. And one last note is, I think for the smaller outlets, I think a lot of it comes down to working together. I think Eleanor Goldfield and I have tried to create an algorithmic, an aggregator site that is not a moneymaker, doesn't have any ads, doesn't have any sponsors. We've just funded it ourselves, the creation of it. It's called radindiemedia.com. And the idea was to have a bunch of independent voices there so that if one of us got deleted or some of us got deleted from our other platforms, there was a place people could still go and get all your content. And, we haven't spent that much time trying to, advertise it and everything, but it is out there and it gets better every day. And so I highly recommend that kind of work. I didn't create it to try and get rich. There's no money in it. It's just a way to try and fight some of the censorship.
Can I just ask a quick follow up? You mentioned shadow ban, right? And would you mind just kind of explaining for your experience as someone being shadow banned for people who aren't quite familiar with sort of how that happens? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Here's how it works. You spend roughly 10 years of your life working pretty hard as a comedian, political comedian, building up your Facebook page. In my case, it's Lee Camp Comedian at Facebook. And you get about 330,000 followers. And then one day Facebook decides, you know what? We're not going to actually show your post to anyone. Just about. I think my posts are shown to something like 0.1% of those followers. And we're also going to stop allowing people to follow you, or as people follow you, we will unsubscribe without telling people the same number that follow, or maybe more. So you essentially never grow. So I went from gaining 5,000 followers a week roughly to gaining 0 ever since 2016. It's only gone down, and my posts certainly never go viral, but they don't even ever get seen by the vast majority of people who so-called follow me. So all of that time and effort spent building up that page becomes essentially useless. I mean, it'd be like if you spent 10 years putting a lot of your time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears into building a restaurant, and then one day the city came by and said, yeah, we're just going to pave over your restaurant or brick up the door and not let anyone come in it anymore. And you go, but I put all this effort into building this thing. And they're like, yeah, we don't care.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Amira, anything you want to ask?
Yeah, so one of the big things like we're talking about right now is censorship, and how much of the control that's in these, private companies it's creating these different narratives that we're seeing and that they want to keep pushing. And something that you've talked about a lot is this control by, mainstream media and the narratives that they spin. And then a lot of other speakers are talking about the connection between mainstream media and the government. So my question to you was, do you see any chance of mainstream media kind of decoupling themselves from government influence and kind of pushing those government narratives? Or do you see that just as a connection that's just going to stay intact for the long term?
Yeah, that decoupling idea sounds great. How do we get that to happen?
I hope we can.
No, the mainstream media. So in some instances, you can point to a media outlet and say that is a state media outlet. And, they love to do that for RT America, even though we had many different viewpoints on that channel. And I have always tried to tell people, make it very clear, I was never censored. I was never told what to say. I wrote all my own stuff, unlike every other political comedian on television. And never censored in any way. But none of that matters to people. So you can say, okay, these are state-funded media outlets. And, of course, you can also point to other outlets that don't get maligned for that, but they are also state-funded media outlets like BBC, PBS, CBC, all of these countries' outlets. And people go, well, America doesn't, outside of PBS, doesn't really have that, right? CNN's not state media. Fox News isn't state media. But what we have is what political philosopher Sheldon Wolin called inverted totalitarianism. We don't have a single kind of fascist leader. We have the rule by anonymous corporate state. It is this kind of mushy glob of corporate ownership that pushes things towards whatever corporation, whatever corporate America wants to happen. And a large 2014 Princeton study shows this is exactly what we have. We have an oligarchy run by corporate interests. So all of these networks, guess what? They're owned by those, 6 conglomerates, maybe it's 5 now, of corporate entities. And at the end of the day, they are always going to do what is right for those corporations, for that corporate America, which also runs our government. So in that way, they are mouthpieces for the state. And those who go against, those who are already well-known and famous and on those networks and happen to have a change of mind or a change of heart and go against the endless war machine or go against capitalist America, they will be pushed out. They will be purged from that system. And there's a long list of people like this. Chris Hedges, Pulitzer Prize winner at the New York Times, forced out for coming out against the Iraq War. Jesse Ventura was going to be the tentpole of MSNBC. They paid him $10 million just to get out of his contract, just to make him go away because he was anti-Iraq invasion. Phil Donahue, #1 show at MSNBC, kicked out when he was against the Iraq invasion. You can go down the list. Even Ed Schultz, who was at RT America for a while, he was forced out of, was it MSNBC or CNN? I think MSNBC, because he was pro Bernie Sanders. It's not even that. He wasn't even, these aren't like radical ideas. These aren't even, these are barely leftist ideas, maybe, but really just supporting the workers. He supported universal health care, and that was too much for MSNBC. So you see that these corporate outlets will always, at the end of the day, do the state's bidding. And, you know, we're seeing it right now. We're seeing this neo-McCarthyism, this new Cold War, and it's at 100%. They've cranked that thing up, that knob of McCarthyist propaganda all the way to 100.
Speaking of Chris Hedges, I was watching the interview you had a couple days with him, and it said that he was talking about the fact that he would have been kicked out of RT for denouncing the war. Do you think he would have been kicked out for denouncing the war, or do you think that he might just be painting a little bit more of a...
I mean, I think that's unlikely. And as I kind of questioned him about that analysis, I said, were you ever censored at RT America? Because I never was. I was never told anything to say. And he said, no, I never was. So he was just, supposing that writing an article saying Putin was wrong to invade might have done him in. But I never saw any examples of that, any proof of that. So I don't know, but
yeah.
I know that, there wasn't a lot of time between when RT America was shut down versus when the invasion started. There was about a week and a half, but I only really had one show that was filmed that I could have written about the invasion. And in that show, I had on Ben Norton, and I said very clearly I was opposed to the invasion. And I never, in that 1 week that we had before the whole network was shut down by U.S. sanctions, I never was told, you got it wrong, don't do that, nothing.
Yeah.
Well, and Abby Martin mentioned something similar on a recent interview that she had on The Hill with Ryan Grimm, Kim Iverson, and the other guy. I can't remember his name right now. And she said something very similar of that she was never told what to say or what not to say, and that there were a lot of times where she would have a lot of kind of pushback for what Russia was doing, narratives that were being told within Russia and things like that. And so I'm assuming that you would agree with that statement as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was there. Well, for one thing, I think people should draw the difference between the personality shows on a network and the news department. So, there is a difference. The RT News, of course, they meet with the news director. They come up with what stories they want to cover. So that's how that process works. For me or for Jesse Ventura, we didn't have that process. We came up with our ideas and wrote what we wanted because we were, personality or opinion shows or whatever you want to call them. Yeah. But in terms of Abby, a lot of people don't realize because they remember that she, they know she was no longer at RT America. She left years ago. And they also remember that the moment where she said Russia was wrong in Crimea. She said both sides were wrong. She said the U.S. was wrong for fostering the conflict, NATO expansion, et cetera. But also Russia was wrong for moving into Crimea. And people think she was fired for that. In fact, and I was already there. We hadn't started Redacted tonight yet, but I was prepping the show, so I was already at those studios. And in fact, she stayed at RT America for another year after that happened. So the people who think that she was fired for getting out of line, aren't even looking at the timeline. She was there for another year and chose to leave after that year. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Abby Martin, so last week on one of our panels, we went over the 2017 D&I report from investigator Jason Clapper, and there was almost 7 pages of
James Clapper.
James Clapper. I keep Jason Clapper is the CNN host.
Made the same mistake last time. Yeah.
Yeah. But there are almost 7 pages of Russia Today in the report, and there's no
Dude, that
mention
thing
of,
was hilarious.
and there was no mention of Russian propaganda at all. So
they,
why
were,
do
they
you,
were like they cover stories like anti-fracking protests. Oh dear God.
exactly? So why do you think that NATO was so vehement about getting rid of RT?
Why was who?
NATO.
Well, they're just doing U.S. bidding. I mean, and NATO is it is an offensive military alliance. People like to think it's defensive, but apparently we defended ourselves all through Libya, destroying their entire society. It was quite the defensive war. It's a military alliance that's largely led by the United States, and they're doing exactly what the U.S. wants. And it did take some pushing for the U.S. to successfully force mainly Germany and France into this kind of garbage propaganda proxy war. At first, Germany and France had a lot of inroads with Russia over the past several years. They were building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Europe gets 40% of their gasoline from Russia. And France and Germany kind of wanted to have cooperation with Russia, which, oh my God, God forbid the world have cooperation. And the U.S. wanted this proxy war. Now, again, I'm opposed to the Russian invasion, and I get that when Russia invades, you've got to put the blame first on Russia, but that doesn't mean you can't talk about the fact that they did that because of the 2014 U.S. and Nazi-backed coup in Ukraine, because of NATO expansion that has encircled them with missiles pointed at them and military alliance on their borders. And so Germany and France didn't want to give into this, but ultimately, they're spineless when confronted by the U.S., and so they have. And the reason they have to get rid of RT America, and it's been on YouTube, it's been banned globally. Well, not just RT America, but RT, is because you can't have, when you're creating a propaganda war like this, and you can be opposed to the Russian invasion and still call out all of the garbage propaganda that we're getting. You can't have a successful counter narrative. You need to basically blank out all voices that are proposing the truth, that are putting forward the truth. And so they really needed to knock out all of those airwaves, even though RT, as a percentage of what people were viewing, is a tiny, tiny percent. But even that, because the truth is more powerful than the lies. And so I think even that they found threatening.
So I guess we'll take one question from the panel, not the panel, but the chat real fast.
Chat. And I also have sort of a question that kind of is similar to that. So could I add that on to that? Would that be possible?
So where should we try to get news from now, since many places we go for it, honest news is gone or hard to find, other than PVN, of course?
I heard of this great site, radindymedia.com. Not a bad place.
It's pretty rad.
No, but honestly, because I'll forget, I could list some things. Obviously, Mint Press, Gray Zone is usually very good. There are some great outlets there, but that I could list. But I think that by going to Rad Indie Media, you kind of can. You don't have to keep going back to it. I'd like for you to, but you don't have to. You can just find the sources there and, judge them for yourself. See what you think of them. There's a lot of really good sources on there.
Now, Andrew, did you have another question to piggyback off of that?
Yeah. So I think, one thing that we always talk about, right, and we have been talking about, is going to decentralized platforms, right? And so that you can kind of speak more freely and such and not get censored, right? And I always, in the back of my mind, I think to myself, once upon a time, YouTube was an independent platform, right? For the first year that it was open, you would go on YouTube, you'd find some weird videos, right? Then you'd all kind of laugh with your friends and be like, what's going on, right? Not anymore, right? So I guess my thinking is, is there anything we could do to ensure that these media platforms that are decentralized right now don't become like YouTube, where Google 1 year in takes over and then everything changes, right? Like,
the idea of decentralized is that you can't really sell it. Like, it can't be sold to a corporate entity. It just can't be bought out. Now, kind of a half step would be if it was in their charter that they couldn't be bought out, but those type of things can usually be changed or find a loophole or something. So yeah, the idea of fully decentralized is, you can say you want to buy us, but there's nothing to buy. This thing is on thousands of computers, and you can't take it away in that sense. Now, obviously, there are people far more informed than I am on how the coding and everything works and how to do it appropriately.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
And Namira, did you have any another question?
Well, I want to stay on the topic because it's really interesting that what we're discussing here.
Okay.
When it comes to removal of something like RT from YouTube, and now it's completely banned worldwide and things like that, do you think that quickness to that removal and the very kind of quick acceptance from a lot of different people, I would say a lot of people not that are like progressive leftists, but like leftists and neoliberals, do you think that their acceptance of that kind of censorship and removal is from the years of propaganda? I mean, really decades of very negative Russia sentiment that's been disseminated to the public in things like movies and TV shows and even like games and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's years of propaganda going into this. We watched every tenet of Russiagate. And by the way, I hate Trump more than anyone else, but I also hate the Democratic Party. So I'm no pro-Trumper, but we watched every tenet of Russiagate collapse. There was nothing there. Many of us knew there was nothing there from the beginning, but as more and more came out, the Mueller report all collapsed. The people that Mueller had indicted at the clickbait farm, ultimately they dropped all those indictments. There was just nothing there to actually point to. It all fizzled away. But it still served its purpose. It served the purpose of a lot of people still believe that Russia somehow put Trump in office. A lot of people still believe all of these garbage stories. Another hilarious one that, many of us knew was fake from the moment it came out, but many fell for it, was Russia's paying Taliban bounties so that they can kill American troops in Afghanistan. And if you go and look, most of the mainstream outlets ultimately admitted that story had no proof behind it. But they leave all the articles up there. People keep sharing them, and it serves its purpose. The propaganda succeeds even when these, pathetic outlets admit that they have fallen for complete falsehoods. It still serves its purpose. I mean, on Redacted tonight, I would highlight some of the most hilarious ones, such as the stuff about North Korea when they're like, oh, Kim Jong-un had his girlfriend killed by a pit of alligators. And then 6 months later, there'd be a New York Times article, Kim Jong-un girlfriend seen alive at concert or something like that. And yet they'll leave the original article up so that people can keep going and sharing the article saying, she was eaten by alligators or whatever the hell. So it really is just pathetic, but they know it serves its purpose. The propaganda exists, and it has succeeded in getting so many Americans to just, they just have a brain virus, and it's eaten away any cognitive thought, cognitive ability, and it continues to this day that they figure. I was on a live stream with I guess he'd consider himself liberal, but who I appreciate his work, but he goes, well, I'm sorry you lost your job, but yay, we got rid of RT America. And I was like, yay? And it's amazing how well this crap works.
It definitely seems to have really succeeded since they deplatformed Trump from Twitter and Facebook. Like that seems to be where this really did start.
Well, yeah, and even before that, I mean, that was the biggest one. But even before that, and some of us were talking about it, but not many, they had done some kind of test balloons where they deleted 800 pages from Facebook in one day, including Free Thought Project, Police the Police, antiwar.com, anti-media. I think anti-media, all those were deleted in the same day. And then simultaneously, all of the editors or contributors or whatever on Twitter had their accounts suspended, meaning Facebook and Twitter had to somehow cooperate and work together to have all of that happen simultaneously, and almost no one cared. And you were like, how do you not see that this will come after everyone else? Like, this is just the beginning. And sure enough, it was.
Well, one thing we saw in that report was the fact that WikiLeaks, the RT, their CEO approached Julian Assange back in like 2011, and they were going to be the only WikiLeaks official, like, one of the sources that were officially publishing WikiLeaks information, and they were even going to offer him a job there. We saw that.
Well, he did. He had I believe, if I'm correct, I don't think they paid him, but he did have a TV show on RT from the Ecuadorian embassy for a while. I don't know how long. It might have only been 6 months or something. Yeah. But yeah, he did, a television network, didn't matter that it was RT or someone else, came to him and said, hey, we'll let you keep doing what you're doing on a TV show on a large network that gets global distribution. And he said, yes. I don't think it was because he was like, oh, great, I'm dying to help Russia. In fact, if you look, WikiLeaks revealed some stuff that had been leaked to them about the Russian government. People want to act like Assange was just working for Russia, but he and WikiLeaks revealed truth and crimes committed by many governments around the world: Britain, Australia, Peru, I think some in Africa, China. If you just go down the list, he revealed stuff about all these countries because that was the information they had access to, and they revealed it, and it's important stuff that everyone should have access to. And the propaganda against him is that he was just working for Russia. It's completely not true.
Well, I wanted to ask a more lighthearted question, because this is some heavy subjects here.
Getting back to leaf blower topic.
A little bit of the leaf blower topics, and some more garden work. But I wanted to know, who are some of your political and comedy influences, or both at the same time?
Yeah. Well, one is over my shoulder here, Bill Hicks. But yeah, there's a lot of great ones. George Carlin, of course. It's fun. He's in the news a lot right now, but Chris Rock doesn't really get enough credit for being a political comedian, because apparently if you're a black political comedian, you don't get called a political comedian. You just get called a comedian or a black comedian. Yeah. Whereas, when I was a kid and I watched Bigger and Blacker, he had some brilliant analysis of our culture, stuff about the AIDS epidemic, saying they're never going to cure AIDS because there's too much money in it. They're just going to help you live with AIDS, and stuff like that. Just great political commentary. But yeah, so there's a lot of great comedians, and then there's kind of the mix. Who was better, Hicks or Carlin? Well, that's tough to say, because I don't think Hicks would have been what he was without the inspiration of Carlin, probably. So you got to give Carlin credit for inspiring Hicks. But I'd still, even exempting that part of the process, I would say Carlin was better. But Carlin also had a lot more time. He put out 18 specials or something like that.
Yeah, not really early.
But yeah, I was going to say, then there are some people that have combined the kind of comedy and activism in the world, done a great job with that. I mean, people like Banksy, people like the Yes Men, Abby Hoffman and the Yippies did some brilliant kind of comedic activism this is back when you could get a tour of the stock exchange in New York. So they got a tour and you're up on the balcony. They walk you around above it. And they took dollar bills and started throwing them out on the trading floor. And sure enough, some of the traders started scrambling to grab the dollar bills. And then they got their photo shoot of traders scrambling for dollar bills while Abby Hoffman was yelling about how they were making money from the napalm being dropped on Vietnam. And, just brilliant stuff like that. So, that was all inspirational to me as well.
Awesome. Any other questions you two have?
Yeah, I have one more. So I think, and this is something that I find actually kind of frustrating coming from people who do claim to be on the left and do have many different left positions and leftist positions, where they say, well, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they're private companies, right? So they can, censor whoever they want.
America's a private company now.
Yeah, right. So I guess I want to kind of hear, like, what do you, because that's a talking point that is given so often, right? And so what is your response to people who say those things and basically validate, they're private corporations, they can do whatever they want when it comes to the censoring that is happening today and as of late?
Well, yeah, I think the problem with that is that when these companies get so big that they basically become the digital town square, you can't just say, "Oh, yeah, it's fine. They can do whatever they want. They can shut down anyone they want." Because if that were the case, then then we should defend any electric company that decides to turn off the electricity on the poor side of town. Well, they're a private company; they get to do what they want. America is such a unfettered, capitalist monster that pretty much everything of our lives is dictated by quote unquote private companies. There's very little public infrastructure left in many ways. There are parts of highways and bridges and stuff that are technically owned by private companies or sovereign nations. Or so should we just say, oh yeah, they can just shut down that bridge to anybody they don't like because that's their private company? No, I think that we need to treat these things are so massive, and the number of people corresponding on them, interacting on them, is a large percentage of America. And we should treat them like national resources. We should treat them, really, they should be designated utilities in our laws. But because corporate America owns our government, they don't actually make those changes. Essentially, nothing gets through Congress that doesn't align with corporate interests. Even things that you think may benefit some people, like Obamacare, it only got through because it aligned with corporate interests. The health insurance companies signed off on it. So really nothing goes through Congress any longer unless it is fully in holding hands with corporate America.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, piggybacking on top of that, do you see any advantages of Elon Musk now having I think it's around like 9% shareholder control of Twitter? And do you think that that's going to kind of help to bring in a new era of free speech? Or do you think it's just going to kind of turn into the same amalgamation that it is now?
I think we need to stop turning to billionaires to save us.
Exactly.
My view, I mean, for one thing, Musk says some good things here and there if you cherry pick. Mm-hmm. He also said he was into electric vehicles because he wants to get off fossil fuels because of climate change. But in fact, his space shuttle trips use more fossil fuels than 100,000 cars for a year or something like that. Yeah. So he says good things, but I don't think in the actions you actually see them. And at the end of the day, something I try and remind everybody often is that billionaires are sociopaths. They're by definition sociopaths. If you met anyone who had 1 billion shoes or 1 billion cats or 1 billion collectible cookie jars, you would call them a fucking lunatic. But because it's 1 billion pieces of green paper, we call them a hero. And that's not how it should be. We should view them like hoarders. All right. You walk into the apartment and you go, this is kind of gross and kind of upsetting. So if you want to even allow them to exist, which I don't even think they should exist, but if you want to allow billionaires to exist, we should at least view them with a little level of shame. Like, wow, you're kind of gross and kind of upsetting. We should not view them like heroes. They should not be on the covers of our magazines. He's going to tell us what to do. He's going to guide us to the better future. I don't think that should ever be the case.
And Lee, I know we're wrapping up on time, but is there anything else that you would like to mention or plug?
Sure. All my stuff's at patreon.com/Lee Camp. You know, I certainly enjoyed that for many years. I didn't have to, you know, all my content could be free. And that's, you know, simply not the world we, you know, live in anymore, or I live in anymore, because, you know, it's all been shut down because of sanctions, or shadow banned or deleted or banned around the world. And I think people should be furious about this. And I don't mean about my stuff, you know, forget me, but people should be furious about the level of censorship that's going on right now. They should be furious that we're being led into another endless war. Make no mistake about it. This is a proxy war going on in Ukraine between Russia and the US. And we're basically using the Ukrainians as cannon fodder. We're arming them to the teeth, hoping that this battle in Ukraine lasts for years, and which of course kills as many people as possible. And what do we need right now? We need a level of cooperation that humankind has almost never seen in order to do anything about climate change. And even outside of climate change, just environmental destruction in general. We should be working together. We need to get outside of toxic nationalism and stand with each other around the globe. And anybody who's saying what I just said is getting deleted from the airwaves, deleted from your social media platforms. And it's incredibly dangerous. And people should be furious, and they should be getting their information outside of those mainstream corporate outlets. If you get your information anywhere that has ads for Raytheon, then it's a problem. All right. Just know that's a problem. If there's ads for weapons contractors on your news source, then you might want to think twice about getting information there.
Or even Applebee's.
That too. I mean, I put that right up there with Raytheon in terms of you know, amount of harm and death caused Applebee's. Yeah.
All right, Lee. Well, thanks for coming on and joining us again. And the door is always open.
Thank you. I think what Austin's talking about is the Assange stand-up comedy benefit we're doing here in Washington, D.C. It's just a little room, but it will be live streamed, I believe. A lot of great people on that show. And I know I retweeted it not long ago, but you can also look up Randy Credico. He's running that show. And hopefully you can see the live stream. But yeah, all my stuff's at patreon.com/Lee Camp. Thanks again.
No problem. And thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for tuning in to PVN, and we'll see you next time.